The Las Vegas Raiders just went out and signed an absolute monster at the linebacker position, and I am excited to talk about Jamin Davis. Davis, former first-round pick out of Kentucky just in 2021, right? Literally just 4 seasons ago, this guy was a first-round pick. He obviously hasn't panned out to what the Commanders wanted out of him, which doesn't mean he hasn't had flashes. The guy's definitely had some flashes, but he is one of those guys that is a little raw. He has to still develop, and he's also a guy where I think for the Raiders, we need a Jamin Davis type of player in this scheme. And we're gonna watch some of his tape and we'll talk about where he'll fit with the Raiders. But this is a guy that the Raiders could actually utilize in their scheme. Germaine Pratt was asked to play on the line of scrimmage for the Raiders, and Pratt struggled, right? He struggled blitzing and coming and getting after the quarterback. He struggled dropping back into coverage as on the line of scrimmage linebacker. Pratt struggled, and the Raiders ended up releasing him. Partly due to that, partly due to something else that we're hearing, and I'll update you guys on that specifically here in a second. But Jamin Davis, to me, again, guys, 6'3", 240 pounds, runs a 4.4 40-yard dash. Jamin Davis is kind of like Jeremy Chin, but in more of like a linebacker form as opposed to Chin is more of in like that safety form. I love the fit, man. I really do love the fit. And I know the Raiders haven't had a ton of success this season. But you do realize that, hey, at some point, maybe maybe you flip the season around, maybe you win 4 or 5 games in a row. Even more than that, we still need to fill out our linebacking group, our O-line group, our quarterback receiver group. We still need to fill these positions going into next season and even the season after that. And Jamin Davis, again, is 26 years old. He still has a ton of football left. And I think for the Raiders, this is a guy that could potentially sticking, especially if you keep Pete Carroll as your head coach, which obviously at this point the Raiders will keep Carroll, right? He's going to be here for at least the next 2 seasons. Bringing in guys like Jamin Davis, there's just a lot of upside with this guy, a lot of potential. And I should also just kind of throw this out there. He's with the Commanders for his first 3 seasons under essentially under a different head coach, right? It's a coach that kind of wanted him. And then he ended up switching in his 4th season to Dan Quinn, right? Dan Quinn gets hired. Dan Quinn runs his own scheme. Jamin Davis doesn't fit the Dan Quinn scheme. Dan Quinn wants safeties playing linebacker, not real linebackers playing at that linebacker position. So Dan Quinn ended up cutting this guy about like 4 or 5 weeks into the 2024 NFL season, right? Last season. And with that, Davis had some opportunities to go to certain places. He ended up going to the Vikings. The Vikings utilized him a little bit in that season, but they ended up not bringing him back in the 2025 season. And Davis is kind of held out for I would think, a team that kind of fits what he is as a linebacker, right? A team where it's an actual scheme fit. And at this point, that really hasn't happened for him, right? That team did not come up until the Raiders reached out and essentially signed him. Remember, former first round pick means there's real upside and real potential with this guy. And given that we run a basic cover 3 defense that's gonna, allow a player to kind of put his athletic traits on display, it allows the guy to just kind of, read and react. There's not too much that's going on, right? We're not running like this super complex Bill Belichick type of scheme with all these different rules. I think Jamin Davis may actually end up having success. Now, I want to show you guys some of this guy's tape because there are definitely moments when you watch this guy and say, that looks impressive. On this one here, he's going to be in a cover 2 defense. You're going to get Jalen Waddle out of the backfield. And Davis ends up being able to break the pass. And this is cover 2 lock, I believe, right, which puts him into a man coverage situation with Waddle. But this is a phenomenal job if you guys ask me, right? Waddle's going to run an angle route. And Jamin Davis is going to end up breaking the pass up. That's a linebacker that weighs, 240 pounds, who's essentially going to be locked in with Waddle, and he just breaks the pass up, right? It does not get better than that one. This time he's going to be way up here. It's just going to be covered 2 man. Way up here, one-on-one with Bijan Robinson. And look at him react. Remember, this guy's like 6'3", 240, right? So for him to be able to get his hands on Robinson, change direction, and just kind of stay on top of it, this is an impressive ass play if you guys ask me, right? He's able to undercut the pass, picks it off. You got another play here. This one, once again, lined up as an inside linebacker. You got Stefan Diggs coming out of the backfield. And look at him make the play on the football on this one as well. Breaks it up. That's a really, really good job. Now, I do want to talk about his run defense a little bit. So in pass coverage, he's pretty solid, but do understand he's 6'3", 240. This type of stuff is not going to happen on every play, right? He's not going to shut down Justin Jefferson, but he is athletic enough to make plays on the football, right? So that was kind of my point in showing you guys those snaps. Here's another thing where I think the Raiders might try utilizing him a little bit more. So here's Jamin Davis lined up on the line of scrimmage as a defensive end. And look at him just go right underneath this and blow this one up. This one loses 4 yards. This was from the last season, right? Last year specifically. The Commanders used him as an edge for a little bit more. That's a really, really, really nice job right there. And again, this just kind of shows you guys that for the Raiders, this is the position he'll probably play. Now, he won't be in a 3-point stance with the Raiders. He'll be essentially playing as an outside linebacker, the way you see the defensive end over here playing, right? He's essentially lined up as an outside linebacker. That actually might be Jeremy Chin. Not sure if that is, but that probably isn't. But Jamin Davis, right? You see him lined up on the line of scrimmage. And I want to show you just a couple more of these type of snaps. Once again, lined up as an outside linebacker on the line of scrimmage. This is the type of role that he'll be playing for the Raiders. You know, Germaine Pratt did this a lot for the Raiders. And maybe Pratt wasn't happy with his role, which is why the Raiders released him. Again, we'll talk about him here in a second. But you see plays where Davis is able to react. He's able to jump through there. He's able to make these plays. This is what the Raiders are getting in this guy, right? He's athletic. So when you put this guy in space, when you put this guy in conflict, where you say, go make this play, he's going to make the play. Right? The guy is a good football player out in space. And again, I think for the Raiders, it's a really solid pickup. Now, again, I don't think this guy's going to become like a superstar linebacker or a top 5 linebacker. He's not the next, Devin Lloyd or Fred Warner, but he could be a productive player for the Raiders. He's a first-round pick for a reason. Hopefully it works out, man. I, again, really like this pickup. I think there's upside. As a blitzer, he's done a pretty good job as well. He has, I think, 22 total pressures over the course of his NFL career. He does a really nice job avoiding running backs and avoiding blocks. I'll show you guys one other example outside of this one. So he obviously ends up blitzing. Saquon Barkley tries to block him, and just look at him. Look at how he's able to avoid that. Generates pressure, brings the quarterback down. Very similar situation on this one. Here he is. Running back's going to have to pick him up. He just goes right past him, brings the quarterback down. Again, this guy is, he's 6'3", he's long, he's lengthy. So to me, I like the pickup. We'll see what he can kind of develop into. I'm excited to watch this guy, man. Again, I think the role that he'll have for the Raiders will be an interesting role. We'll see how the Raiders utilize him now. The Raiders did also sign one other guy. So the Raiders signed, obviously, Jamin Davis to the practice squad, but they signed John Radigan to the active roster. And this one's interesting because this guy's been with Pete Carroll in the past, and Pete Carroll had some interesting things to say. Coach Pete Carroll said that linebacker John Radigan is a really good football player and the real deal. We loved him when we had him in Seattle. I watched his tape a little bit. This guy's kind of interesting as well. We'll see what he can kind of pan into. Not a huge fan, but he looked pretty good on tape as well. And, at this point, the Raiders, we're not going to make drastic changes. We're not going to say, hey, let's fire Pete Carroll and let's promote this guy. We're not going to do that. For as much as, I wouldn't mind the Raiders doing that, right? But, that does set you back a year because at that point you'd have to find a coach. In that, too, I don't know if there's modern coaches that are available to hire, right? Maybe Jesse Minter's a guy the Raiders could potentially hire. But right now, I think the best thing the Raiders could do is just try filling out the roster for guys that could be successful going into next season. Guys are going to turn over. Guys are going to be changed out. When Josh McDaniels came here, one of the first things he did was he released Alex Leatherwood, right? Got rid of him. One of the first things he did as he got to the Raiders. When John Gruden got here, he traded Khalil Mack. He traded Amari Cooper. These coaches are going to come to a new team and a new system, a new scheme, and they're gonna make changes. Pete Carroll's going to make changes. Next year's team will be a lot better. They'll fit his scheme a lot more. Hopefully, it's able to have success. Also, I want to just kind of give you guys a quick update on Germaine Pratt. So the Colts actually signed Germaine Pratt earlier today. This was 2 days after the Raiders released him. And I want to give you guys one other update, which this one's coming from a Raiders insider, Obi. This is what he's saying. And if this guy's saying it, chances are it is true. He's saying regarding why the Raiders may have released Germaine Pratt, I'm hearing from a source that he was constantly talking crap to the coaches and teammates. Bad attitude might have been the reason. So, apparently, according to Obi, Germaine Pratt was released because of the attitude. Now, I'm going to trust that Obi is sourcing a player, right? He knows a lot of the Raiders players. He's broken news in the past as well. If you guys don't know, I'm going to trust that this is exactly why the Raiders released Germaine Pratt. But I'll also just throw this out there. You know, some people will say Germaine Pratt had a bad attitude. I think he was a passionate football player. And you can one person will say bad attitude, another person will say passionate, right? It's the same thing with Jack Sparrows-Johnson. Someone might say he's cocky, it's a bad attitude. Some people might say he's confident, right? And he's passionate, right? To me, Germaine Pratt came off as a passionate football player, but also do understand the attitude may have been one of the reasons. And on top of that, Pratt was not playing as a stacked linebacker, the traditional linebacker spot, which he's essentially played for most of his career. Pratt was playing a completely different position, so maybe he didn't want to play in that position. And maybe he asked Pete Carroll, hey, I don't want to play in this position. Either line me up as a stacked linebacker or just don't use me. Maybe that's why the Raiders chose not to have Pratt travel with the team, which obviously at that point we all knew it was coming. He was going to be released, retire, or whatever, right? But this is according to Obi. I'm going to take it for what it is. And then finally, last update, we'll just kind of quickly wrap it up with, is that head coach Pete Carroll said that Michael Mayer cleared the concussion protocol and he will practice fully today for the Raiders. Of course, Brock Bowers is it remains day-to-day at this point. So that's going to be the update on the Raiders tight ends. You know, I do think the Raiders can bounce back and still have success this season. I know not everybody's going to agree with that because a lot of people look at it like, hey, if you're not one of the top 5 teams, if you're not 3-2 or 4-1, you're not going to have, you're not having success. And to turn it around is difficult, and I agree with that. It is very, very difficult to do. But you can still have a successful season where you win 7 games, and you or maybe 8 games, or maybe 9 games. Or you can still have a successful season winning that many games, even if you don't make the playoffs, or maybe you get close to making the playoffs, or maybe even slip into the playoffs. Who knows, right? You can still have success, and I know it's not looking like that right now, but do recognize that the Raiders have a whole new scheme, a whole new system, a new head coach, a new offensive coordinator. Sometimes it takes time, right? It takes time when you're bringing all these different guys and you're turning the roster over. The best thing the Raiders can do going from this year to next year is just keep it consistent. Get the players that make sense. Have a consistent, scheme as you're kind of going forward. And over time, you just get better and better and better as a team, as a roster. Also, let's not overlook, having Michael Mayer back will make this team a little bit better on the offensive side. And also, let's not confuse this. The offense has been the reason why the Raiders are struggling. And I know Geno Smith struggled as a quarterback. Something still tells me he at some point will find success. We can't overlook the fact that Geno Smith, one of the ways he has success is by pushing the ball downfield. If your main target's Dante Thornton, a guy that can't really catch those passes and bring them in, you're not going to have success, right? You can throw him 10 passes. He's not going to catch any of those, right? If you're throwing him like those 50-50 deep shots. When he was with the Seahawks, the reason why he had success was because he had Tyler Lockett, where he could put the ball out there and Tyler Lockett would go out there and catch it. He had DK Metcalf, who would make those 50-50 passes. He hasn't had, he has not only had, he has Dante Thornton out there, which isn't great, but he hasn't even had Brock Bowers, the one guy that can make those 50-50 plays. He hasn't had him healthy for the entire season. The only time he had him was in week 1, and Brock Bowers had over 100 yards when he was healthy, and he hasn't been healthy up to this point. And you can put that on coaching a little bit. You can put that on Pete Carroll. Geno Smith doesn't really have the pass catchers downfield that he can trust. Jacoby Myers is not a 50-50 guy. He's not making those plays. Trey Tucker's not making 50-50 plays either. Now, Trey Tucker will burn people, which Geno Smith does have to complete those passes. I do think as the Raiders continue, as they continue to get healthier, right, Michael Mayer will be back. Brock Bowers hopefully at some point will be back, hopefully fully healthy. I do think the Raiders will be able to have success, and hopefully they'll be able to win a couple of games. But it is going to start against the Tennessee Titans. This is a winnable game for the Raiders. If you can't win this game, end the season. All right, so just tank the rest of the season. But if you can at least win this game, and hopefully Brock Bowers can just sit this game and you can still win the game. And then against the Chiefs, hopefully Brock Bowers is 100% at that point. And even if he's not 100%, even if he's like 90%, you have a bye week right after that. He could get 100% by the time, I believe it's week 8 at that point. By the time that game comes around, he might be 100%. So Hopefully the Raiders can get fully healthy. Hopefully the weapons can start to connect a little bit with Geno. Hopefully Geno can also have a little bit more success. Earlier today, Geno said that, hey, he said I think 6 of his 9 interceptions were tipped at the line of scrimmage. I need to go check that. I'm not 100% sure if that's a fact or not, but he's saying that they were tipped, and he's also saying that, hey, I'm making my reads, and essentially I'm doing what I'm being told to do in this offense. And you can't predict tip passes, right? That's not really on the quarterback. He says I threw a pass to Jack Bech, who was open in the end zone, which he was. It was tipped. It was intercepted. That's just bad luck, essentially, right? And that is true. But at some point, hopefully the Raiders, have a little bit of good luck, essentially, right? We'll see what ends up happening, man. Either way, I love the Jamin Davis pickup. We are getting better as a roster, and we'll continue to grow. We'll continue to get healthier. And although the season does not look great, we've seen other teams 1-2 wins early on, and then it just clicks, and then they have a lot of success over the rest of the season. And even if we don't make the playoffs, success in one season can carry into the next season. The confidence can carry into the next season. So we'll see what ends up happening. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time with another video.